The new Salem plot movie. What is going on exactly? Original release date of September 2022 got moved up to April of 23, and now there is no date. We don't know what's going on. So why the delay? We're going to be talking about that in this episode. I'm joined by Sam Straub and Ben Ottaviano. Let's get to it. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Everything 101. I'm joined once again by two Salem's Lot connoisseurs. I got Mr. Mr. Ben Ottaviano from yes, well, you guys are experts. That's my French way of saying you're
French.
experts.
I was going to say, man, you
Connoisseur.
fancy.
Yeah. Ben Ottaviano from the YouTube channel Boogeyman Ben, and I'm going to put a link down below. And guys, if you love Salem's Lot, you're going to love everything on Ben's channel. Make sure you go check it out. Click subscribe and all that. Ben, thanks for hanging out with me again.
Oh, it's an honor and a pleasure always.
Yes, sir. And we're joined by Mr. Sam Straub, he's a Salem's Lot aficionado. Let me tell you, Sam, I really enjoyed hanging out with you last time. I'm glad you're back, man. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me on again as well.
You got it. So I want to start out, we were at September 9th, then we were bumped up to April. Now we don't have a date.
Yep.
So I'm reading a lot of different things. So I really just want to get your take on what you think is going on, because it could be a lot of different things. Ben, what do you think?
Well, it's strange. I'm just going to go into the fact that I started covering the movie being made back in August of last year. I think the 27th was the last time it was the first video I put up. And that was when Louis Pullman had been announced as Ben Mears. That was the first video I did. And I followed it throughout the production. It was being shot in Ipswich. I saw like very small little behind the scenes things. Like, we knew it was going to be taking place in the 70s. And I saw the Marston House being constructed. But it's been a very strange production in the fact that we've gotten nothing. There's been nothing. There's been no behind the scenes. There's been no, just like little stills. I mean, usually they have a still photographer on set. So I'm just surprised that we have seen very little, if nothing. The biggest picture we've gotten is I have it right here, is the cover for the tie-in. I mean, which is just the same book with a different cover. I mean, it's the same Stephen King book, and they just put a new cover on it to celebrate the fact that the new film was coming out. I don't know what caused this problem, but there is a big problem with this film. And I don't understand the secrecy, especially the William Sadler stuff, which we talked about prior. Like, what is the secrecy about who he's playing? It was saying that he was playing Barlow. It said that he wasn't playing Barlow. Yeah. Then it was like, well, is he playing, Crockett? And people were like, no. And I'm like, well, who is it? I think I had a few people interact with me on one of the pages or on one of my videos. It was like, well, it's not him either. I'm like, I'm not going to play this guessing game with you. Yeah. I'm not on set, so I have no idea who he's playing. I can only go off of only off of what's been announced. But I think that there's something isn't playing right. I don't know if it's because they were shooting it during COVID times. Maybe they were limited on how much time they had. Maybe they weren't able to get everything they wanted to get done because they were under restrictions. I mean, COVID, lockdowns and things like that are lifting, daily in terms of it's not as big of a deal as it was last year when they were shooting. We were still in the midst of Delta and Omicron and all that. People were just getting the booster shots. So I don't know. I think it comes down to a couple of factors. I think it comes down to maybe they didn't get everything that they wanted. Maybe they're feeling increased pressure because of the love of the original. I don't know. I mean, and they have a lot to live up to because
absolutely,
it is a television movie. I know there's people out there that say, yeah, it's dated. I mean, I heard Christopher Nelson from Thing with Two Heads podcast say recently, because someone asked him on a live show what he thought about Salem's Lot coming out. And I guess he has some friends that are working on it, makeup effects people. Yeah. And he said he loves the original film, but it's dated. So I'm sure a lot of people feel like it's dated. I just think that I think there's a vast majority of people that love it just as much as we do.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe with the content that you're putting out, Danny, the content that others are putting out, I don't want to take credit for anything because I'm just not that kind of person, but I have been covering it more extensively than a lot of people. And I'm not saying I
Absolutely.
have billions of subscribers, but people are thanking me for telling them what's going on. So
Yeah.
there is a huge fan base for this film, this
Mhm.
original 1979 film. And I think that maybe they're watching what's going on. You never know. And they're going, ugh, because that whole thing with Alexander Ward that happened like towards the end of July where they said he was going to be Barlow.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, but it was on like Bloody Disgusting. But it was a few weeks after I had commented on it because a friend of mine sent it to me. It was somebody that is a friend of mine on Instagram. And he said that, yeah, he said, did you see this? And I looked it up and then I realized that Alexander Ward has been in other films that Gary Dauberman has worked on. So he was
Yeah.
in Annabelle Comes Home. He's been in things like he's played monsters and things like that. So I'm like, oh, and he looks like Reggie. So I'm like going,
Yeah.
did they recast Barlow at the last minute? Did they realize how much love there was for that character and the look and the depiction of the character? I've heard a lot of people say things, and again, I don't want to get too long-winded because I want Sam to have his take on this as well. And I've had people on my YouTube channel like Jeremy Horn, and there's another guy named John Ryder, who are just completely like, it's not coming out. They screwed up. They failed with Gary Dauberman, all these things. And I'm like going, Gary Dauberman was responsible for two of the biggest films in
Yeah.
horror history, and that is it, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. He wrote those. He also directed Annabelle Comes Home, which was a huge hit. So I'm like going, and James Wan is behind this. James Wan has been responsible for some of the biggest horror movies in history, from Saw,
Right.
Insidious. And even if you didn't like it, I liked Malignant a lot. So it's like, I feel like you have some huge chops here. You have some huge genre chops. How could they have made this big of an error?
Yeah.
I just don't see it. I feel like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. There's been a lot of shakeups at Warner Brothers. I know that the Batgirl movie got completely pulled and is not coming out. And that was a huge film with the directors that did Bad Boys for Life, I believe. And I'm like going, I think it's just, there's something that's keeping it from the public eye. And it's just very strange that a film that went into production a year ago, that was announced over 3 years ago, we have no images from it. So there's something wrong. And I think it might have been their take on Barlow. That's the only thing I can think of, is that maybe they thought we're going to go more towards the novel, and they realized that how much love people have for the way that he's depicted by Mr. Nalder. So it's like, I think it's there's something very wrong with the production. The only thing I can think of is that they're getting nervous because of what the public is wanting, and maybe they're just trying to maybe they're trying to do some stuff that they weren't able to do because of limitations last year. There's a couple of factors that it could be. I wish I had more of an insight into it, but there is something very wrong, and I think my biggest thing goes back to the fact that we haven't seen anything from it.
Yeah, I'm going to lean toward, I like the thought that at least it could be they really realize they made a mistake with James Wan and Gary Dauberman, but I'm going to lean away from that. It's like you said, how could they realize they made that big of a, these guys,
they're
how can you're pulling in the biggest guns you have.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to, I've always said the biggest problem with making this movie is when you read the book or when you watch the 79 version, there's a feeling, there's something about it that's different than other books you read. It's a fear, it's a certain feeling. I don't know. And I've always said, I think the biggest challenge is going to be putting that on film, actually being able to capture it. It's going to, I don't know. So I'm going to lean away from that theory.
I don't believe
just
that.
like you.
I just don't believe that, because let's put it this way, if Dauberman had never helmed a film, maybe this was a big thing for him to helm. I mean, again, Annabelle Comes Home was already established. We had 2
Yeah.
Annabelle films before that.
Mhm.
But again, he had already done the It films, and I'm sure that Andy Muschietti had some input into how those things played out, but he was the screenwriter. So I'm like
Yeah.
going, and with Juan, that's the thing that, you can say what you want about the last Conjuring movie. I did think it suffered because Juan didn't direct it, but at the same time, I still thought it was good. I didn't think it was great, but I have yet to see a bad James Wan film or something
Right.
that he's produced that has been bad. I love Dead Silence is my favorite James Wan film. Nobody talks about it. I like that more than any of his other films. Very atmospheric, very noir feeling when you watch that film.
Yeah.
So I just feel like you have 2 people that are really well vested in the horror genre.
Yes.
And real quick before you, John, I wanted to make sure I got his last name right. My friend Ray Fundora is the one that told me about Alexander Ward. Just want to
Gotcha.
make sure I got his last name right. I didn't want to say it wrong, but he's the
Yeah.
one that told me ahead of time. And then I found out, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, Bloody Disgusting had put it up, and I'm like going, wow, they're way behind me. It's like, thank God I got people that are letting me know about this stuff. It
Really.
was just like, he said, hey, did you hear about this? I'm like, no. And it's like my friend John Campapiano let me know about the test screenings that were coming up.
Mhm.
Not the test screening. He let me know about the fact that it was pulled completely from
Okay.
from the slate, and they were putting the new Evil Dead movie in its place.
Mhm.
So it's like, that's, yeah. And then the fact that we got test screenings coming up now, it's like a guy named Tom let me know about that. So yeah, it's like, it's weird though that they pulled it, and then like a week later they're doing test screenings again. So, or 2 weeks later. So we'll have to wait and see. They're coming up. They're already sold out. They have 2 that are going to be this Wednesday. So 4:30 and 7:30 at some Iota, I think is the name of the theater. So I don't know. But anyway, that's my take on it.
I hear you. Sam, are you leaning toward a particular theory? What do you think?
You guys, out of the 3 of us, have kept up on more of the media and the statements and the connections more than I have. With me being in retail and seeing a huge decline in my work environment of people quitting, people giving in their 2-week notices, people finding other avenues, other options, financial stability, the inflation of things just rising with gas and costs and deliveries, truck drivers, supplies. I thought that might have played a hand in it at the beginning of this, thinking that, okay, it's postponed because it could be depending on budget, depending on materials, depending on people on the set. Either they're working overtime and not getting the pay that they so rightfully deserve. I try to look at that too, because I think that doesn't always get discussed or brought to the table, that, people have to be fed and families have to be taken care of. It's that. It could be that it's just, I would really like to think that, yeah, they do have a lot to live up to, because there is a cult following from the original. We all can agree on that. And if they are doing it and doing it right, I like to think that they're all sitting in a room with whatever they have and going, do you think we can do better? Do you think we can tweak that? Because we obviously can't live up to the 79 version, that's done, but can we represent it in a light that we could make something now and have it be talked about 40 years later, like we do with the old one? Is it going to have that history? Is it going to have that stamp of approval?
Yeah.
I think what Warner Brothers could do is issue some form of a statement like, thanks for your patience, we've gotten this far. They don't have to disclose exactly what might be going on, but it would at least give us an explanation as to what's halting the final cut or whatever you need to do to present it to the public. Like, for instance, we should have had a trailer months ago.
Yeah.
It had something to give us an introduction of what to expect. And there has been a couple things, but a lot of people have not seen it. So it could be a cajillion things. I think everything brought to the table is definitely relevant. I think it's us just kind of going, well, we seem to be the only ones giving the public information as we go, instead of the company or the people who are trying to release it. In fact, we haven't heard a word. It's been very quiet and kind of eerie, with the fact that Warner Brothers is one of the biggest machines in the planet for centuries. And this is the first time where things have been pulled, things have been yanked, things have been taken down or canceled. And there really hasn't been a proper statement to kind of keep everyone at bay and somewhat be patient, like, hey, yeah, this is going to be worth it. Just hang in there. We got a couple things to wrap up. We're going to go ahead and revamp this scene or these things because, obviously we want to do it and we want to do it right. I mean, you can't please everybody, but they do have a lot to live up to. So yeah, it's kind of a toss up. I'm just waiting, I'm not holding my breath at the same time, but I think just a proper statement of, hey, you've been with us this far, just hang tough.
Yeah.
It will happen. If it's not going to happen, issue a statement that it won't, because that way you're not trying to plan things like, for instance, we all wanted to meet in Ferndale at a certain time. Let's celebrate, the opening of this. Let's get together. So we can't be the only ones that are trying to arrange that properly. And it's kind of, we're all at the starting line. We're in running position, and we look around. There's nobody with the starting gun shooting it. In fact, there's nobody around. Oh, okay. I guess we'll just kind of hang here for a while and see what happens. Yeah.
Well, I think you're totally right. Any kind of statement would be great. They have to know that we're out here wondering, and they have to know that the fan pages are here. I tend to look at all the evidence. The fact that, well, we had a date, then we had another date, then we didn't have a date, but now they're going to do screenings. I just tend to think that they're, based on the evidence, they're just not sure it's what they want to put out yet. Yeah. And I'm the ultimate optimist. I can't stand pessimism. I get on the fan pages and it's never coming out. And I see that as just forget it, let it go. And I'm like, all right, maybe you're right, but we haven't heard that yet. I'm going to be optimistic about it. I just tend to think right now they're trying to see, what do we have? And are we really going to put this out or change things? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's all we can think right now. I think it's just, it's one of those things where I've heard some people say maybe they should have made it a mini series because it's so much.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I've heard. I know they were trying to do it as a theatrical, because even though the original was redone in Europe and put out as a theatrical film, it was never intended to be a theatrical film. It was shot as a mini series, and I don't know. To be honest with you, as much as I'm more curious at this point. I'm more curious about what it's going to be like. Nothing is ever going to touch the original for me. I don't care how good it is. It's impossible. It's like somebody was trying to say something about, they were making us, again, because I do so much Salem's Lot stuff. I have people I have the same people that sometimes comment on multiple videos, and they were trying to say something about Reggie's makeup, and they were trying to say something about, certain things weren't right. And I said, I really just, I say what you want, think what you want. For me, I said, this film is a blanket. It's perfect. It doesn't, it cannot be, you cannot change my opinion about it. It's been a friend of mine for over 4 decades. It's not, it's like, you can't change it. And
you just want the temperature of the same blanket. You want the same warmth. You're not going to get the same pattern, nor are you going to get the material of that blanket. You want to make sure that blanket holds you the way that it's held you for this long. And I think that's hopefully what they want to accomplish. They want that warmth. And if they're going to get that temperature, they're going to have to do it right. And they're going to have to reassess a few things. And if we all knew that that's why it's being pulled or why it's being put on hiatus, then we have more of an ideal patience level to go, okay, cool, this is going to be really cool. Okay, just the fact that you're pulling that gear back, waiting and doing it for whatever reason, if you're waiting for materials to come in, you're waiting for more budget to be coming into the bank, whatever that is, whatever they do behind the scenes that the public doesn't always, really be informed about, then that's a very huge legitimate excuse to wait even longer and knowing that this is going to really pay off for everybody involved. Because we want to have faith. Why else would they've gotten this far, and why else would they have issued what they've had so far with confidence? You don't see any real cold feet. You just see a lot of positive, confident approach, and hopefully that's continuing. It's just delayed. Hopefully that confidence is just delayed until they can get there.
I don't see them. I mean, I don't know because of what happened with the Batgirl movie, but I don't see them sinking this much time, this many test screenings, and then just saying, oh, we're not going to do it, because it's costing them money no matter how long they prolong it and how many times they put it out to have people look at it and critique it. they've already had it at CinemaCon. They've had 3 test screenings. I'm like going, how many can you have before you
Right.
finally just go, let's put something out so that the people that are actually excited for this can at least get a taste of what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny. I mean, can you think of another film though, Ben? You know so much about the horror genre. Can you think of another film that has gone through this kind of scrutiny where we've just waited and waited and waited? Could that be saying something about Warner Brothers knowing how important this is to people like us? I can't think of another film. Maybe you can.
There was a Stephen King, and I mentioned it when they were, you know, the whole thing about them pulling it and, you know, not having a release date for it. And there was a a movie called Cell that was another Stephen King property, and it starred John Cusack and Sam Jackson. It kind of was like a reteaming of them from 1408. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. It came out in 2007, and that was another small Stephen King story from one of his books. I think it was Everything's Eventual was the book it came from. But this was kind of a and Cell is one of my favorite Stephen King books, and it just deals with cell phones. Like this thing happens, I think it's called a pulse, and it causes everybody that's on a cell phone at the time to turn into like these mad hybrid kind of zombies. And it deals with these people surviving through this kind of apocalypse. And it deals with John Cusack's character as an artist. He's trying to find his son, and it's a really good book. And the movie was god awful. It was being shot, I'm gonna say, in probably, I think, again, when they started talking about it, I'm gonna say 2013. I believe it was shooting in 2014. It got stalled, I don't know how many times. Now, Stephen King wrote the screenplay for it, but then it was kind of taken out of his hands. And then it got dumped onto streaming platforms and things in like 2016, because that's how I saw it. And I remember watching it, knowing that this is probably not going to be that good because of the way that it was handled and treated. It wasn't something where, but again, it was one of those things, and that's why I get nervous, is because I saw like one picture from the shot of the beginning of the film where they're in Boston, downtown Boston, when all this is going on. It was John Cusack and Sam Jackson, and I forget her name, but the young actress that plays in the Orphan movies, she's in it too.
Yeah.
And it just shows them, and that's all you saw for like maybe a year. You didn't see anything. There wasn't a trailer. There was nothing. Then all of a sudden the trailer came out, and I'm like, okay. And then it just sort of was out on streaming, and it was a movie that just, again, you know, I don't like to compare books with films, because they're both different mediums. But at the same time, it's like the heart of that novel was so, you know, you were on this journey, and then to see what they did with it, and you had Sam Jackson and John Cusack, who I was a bigger fan of long ago. I think his acting's a little strange now, but it was a mess. It was a mess of a film. It just was like boring and silly. You didn't feel any of the desperation that you felt when you were reading that book. And I felt like the fact that King had written that screenplay, and then it was kind of, and I think it had to do with the studio or something was going on. Again, I haven't looked into it in a long time, but I did do a review of it on the channel, and I bought it because I'm a completist, but I've never rewatched it. So in 6 years, I've never rewatched it. It's one of those films that that's the only time I can remember where there was all this hype about it, and you're like, oh my God, they're getting them back together. Because I like 1408. I didn't think the ending of it is okay, but it was an interesting setup. And I thought Sam and John did a great job at that. I was excited for it, and then it just kind of fell off the radar. And then you go, is that movie even coming out? And there's been a few movies like that, like the New Mutants, and there's been a few other ones where they were like going to come out, and they would push the release date out and out and out and out, and there was never any good reason for it. I'm trying to think of another one that they did, that the Green Inferno, the Eli Roth film. They did the same thing with that one. They pushed that one out, I believe, a year. Those are the only ones I can really think of offhand. But yeah, this one, but with those, at least you saw something. Now, the Green Inferno had a trailer and images, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then at least Cell had a couple of pictures. I mean, it didn't have much, but again, this is all we've gotten. This is all we've gotten from this film. That's the only image I've seen.
One picture.
one
Yeah,
picture, and you
really
can't even
not.
see, and it's just all their backs are to you. You see the house kind of in the distance, and I'm like
Yeah,
going,
I mean, there's really no intrigue or any kind of mystery to it other than the obvious, and even that doesn't
yeah.
sustain you
Yeah.
for
But
long.
even that, like I said, this is just my work journal, but this is still 1,000 times scarier than
Right.
this. And I'm like going, I just, again, I want to see something that says what you have these two masterminds in terms of horror, with Wan and Doberman, and I'm like going, I think the It remakes were good. I was against them when they were announcing it, because I love the Tim Curry one with all of the faults that they went through. And that documentary on it, Pennywise, the story of it, is great. If you want to watch a great behind the scenes on them making that, watch that. It's really, really good. But you see the limitations that they had with television and children being in peril and things like that. But I still think it holds up. There's some things about it that are very television. But you have these two powerhouses that are involved with this property, and I feel like it just doesn't make any sense why we haven't gotten anything. And so it does make me concerned, but I'm kind of like you, Danny. I kind of try to be optimistic and just say, we're not in the ring with them right now. Maybe they're trying to make the best movie they can. Maybe they're seeing, like, we all lived through a horrible time with this pandemic, and I'm sure it affected a lot of productions. I mean, there's a lot of television shows that we were watching that were shooting during the pandemic, and those last episodes, you're like going, yeah, maybe you should have waited until this pandemic was over, because they just don't have they weren't able to do everything they could do when it was just normal time. So that's another thing that plays into it. I've heard rumors about casting. They're like, oh, there's no big names in it. I'm like, well, there was no big names in it. No one knew who Bill Skarsgård was.
Right.
Yeah.
No one knew. Finn Wolfhard was the only one you knew, and that was because of Stranger Things. And it had only been on for 2 seasons when they were shooting that.
Mm-hmm.
Not even 2 seasons, one, because the second season hadn't even aired yet. So I'm like going, I don't believe the whole thing about not being a big enough cast. That's another thing. And Louis Arquette was just in I keep saying Louis Arquette. Louis Pullman was just in Top Gun. So that's another big thing that he was just in. So
it's just really easy to kind of zoom in on the dartboard of negativity and just like, well, yeah, okay, but think of it from the other side too. There's other things. It's not all just negative. It's amazing how some of us just don't have patience, because we're so far into it when we're literally at the starting line and we're all waiting. And there's nothing worse than being prepared and then something drops out. I mean, it's just natural for all of us to come to some kind of dark conclusion or to point fingers or accuse very quickly. It's like, okay, take a deep breath. It's going to work out. Imagine the people who are doing this. I mean, what they're going through and how they're sleeping at night trying to meet the deadline. You got to think of those people.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Right. That's and
there's been a lot of films. A lot of films have been affected by the pandemic. They have productions. So we have to take that into consideration too.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about the screenings in just a minute, but I want to ask you, in the spirit of optimism, okay. We everybody knows we've established the fact that we have an attachment to 79, and that's just not going to change. But in the spirit of optimism and curiosity, the new film comes out. Let's say it comes out. All right. And what I just want to ask you, what are, one, maybe 2 scenes that you are really looking forward to from the book, seeing on the big screen, like a different take on it? Because I've got a couple. Sam, you got any thoughts?
I don't know if there's one particular scene. I think it's just the whole general intrigue.
Yeah.
If they can keep that platform honest, I'm good with anything at this point, because there's just a certain rhythm. There's a certain speed on that treadmill that just continues and builds a little bit more speed as it progresses. Yeah, that's what intrigued me when I was a child. I mean, I have very favorite scenes. One of my favorite scenes, and it's not even shock value, is when Susan gets out of the car when she gets up to the house for the first time after she leaves Ben's, place, and closes the door, and suddenly she's entranced by the look of the house. There's a scene where the house is pivoted up, and then you see a big cloud come over it, and it's overcast.
Yeah.
And
then I know what scene you're talking about. Yeah,
I get goosebumps just talking about that, because the way the soundtrack and the way the photography and that still shot
Mhm.
To me, there's just so many words without having to speak of that particular shot of the Marston house. It
Mhm.
lets you know everything about it. It lets you know its history, where it's come to and where it's at now and where it might be going to. And just that alone, I'm hoping for those things to really be in full focus in the film. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be dialogue, doesn't have to be a lot of physicality. They're just shots. They're just panoramic shots of either an object or a situation that doesn't have to be verbally addressed. That's what
Yeah.
I'm hoping. I
Gotcha.
really do. Scene wise, yeah, let's definitely keep those intact. But it's just it's the audience, it's the attitude, the mood.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
so important because you can do everything else. But if you don't have that established, then it's going to be really hard to keep those scenes intact and have them on their own.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Ben, you got anything that you would look forward to seeing?
Well, I think the scene for me in the book that I remember, I haven't read the book in a number of years, and I wanted to read it when I knew the film was going to be coming out. I was going to read it again because I wanted to revisit it, and I have the illustrated version, which I haven't read, which has more prose in it, from my understanding. But I think the kids in the woods, I remember in the book that really terrified me. I think it's because there's one point where they say there's something in front of them and they
Mhm.
can't tell what it is. I don't know why that image. I remember reading it as a kid in my bed at night late, and that whole idea creeped me out. Now, even the scene in the '79 film is still, I think, terrifying. But that whole thing about being in the dark and knowing there's something there but not being able to see it, that freaked me out. I remember reading in the book, in the movie, when in the book it's Matt Burke, but when Burke goes into the room and sees Mike Ryerson,
Yes.
if I remember correctly, in the book he's laying in bed, and in the
Yeah.
movie he's in the rocking chair and he
Mhm.
sits up in bed. And I think it would be kind of interesting how they do that in this new one. I know that is one of the scenes they showed at CinemaCon.
Mhm.
Was that one? They showed that one. I believe they showed the cemetery scene with Danny Glick being buried, and I think the
Yeah.
other one was when Barlow is in the Petrie's house. So I'm curious, like, how they're gonna do those scenes, just because the 2004 film, the scene with Mike and Matt Burke is a joke. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys remember that.
Yeah. Trying.
It's a joke, and I was like
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
this is how you compete to the scene with the Toby Hooper and Jeffrey Lewis, and I mean, how, and Lou Ayres did. I'm like going, that scene is so incredibly scary to this day
Mm-hmm.
with very little effects outside
Yeah.
of the context
Yes.
and the teeth. That
Yeah.
Jeffrey Lewis did everything with his body and just
Yeah.
standing on his tiptoes when he got
Yeah,
out of the
arching
rocking
his
chair. Yeah,
shoulders
he
up.
arches his shoulder and he talked different. And that's one thing
Really?
I think I mentioned when we last talked. I said the thing about that character that was so endearing to me is that he's almost kind of an outcast a little bit in town, not so much to the point of, the characters I identified with in that movie so well were Mark, Ben, and Mike. And I think it's because Ben is looked at as a stranger, Mark is an outcast because he's into the things he's into, and Mike is kind of like this lonely man who has a dog that works in a graveyard, and he's kind of, Cully asks him for a favor and things like that. But the heartbreak when his dog dies, and then you see, when he's, been bitten and just what he's going through, and then that complete 180 of how Jeffrey Lewis was able to transform that character in one scene, where
Yeah,
you've established that character through the whole film, and then you see him and he's terrifying because of just the mannerisms and the voice change and everything.
yeah, because he sure
That's
doesn't
what I
show
want to
that
see.
he's a human being. He does not resemble
No,
that kind of seductive aggression.
no, and it's like
Yeah, that's a good point, Ben. I didn't even think of
I've
that.
always loved that, and
Yeah,
I've always loved, and I'm so angry I never got to meet Jeffrey Lewis because his
yeah,
performance has lasted with me forever. I mean, that was the moment when I saw that film at 5 years old that I knew that I said, I'm in a new, as a 5 year old, I'm in a new territory now. This is terrifying me to a point that I've never been scared before.
Yeah.
But it lasted. And I know that Spencer Treat Clark is going to be playing Mike Ryerson, and I'm just curious how are they going to do this? You know,
Or as he watched it himself, to be able to take a little bit of him, and not only as a tribute, but to kind of put a little bit of his element into his role.
and he's a good actor. He was in Gladiator. He was in
absolutely.
Unbreakable. It just did Glass, and I think
Yeah.
he was in oh god, I can't think of the movie all of a sudden, but it was one that Sean Penn was in. God, it came out. I'll think of it in a second, but he's a good actor, and I think he could do a lot with it. So I think my big thing is like how, because I was so disappointed in the 2004 version, and in the book and in the movie, that scene means so much to me. How are they going to do that? And I feel like Juan has the chops in terms of his, you know, just what he's, you know, in terms of as a producer. I don't know how much input he's having, but they need to make that scene iconic, or try to at least try to make it memorable.
Right.
And but so yeah, that's the scene for me that I'm really thinking about. And I'm also wondering if they're going to stick to how Barlow is. A lot of people say it was the way Barlow goes out in 79 is too quick, but that is kind of how it happens in the book, and they did follow suit a little bit in the miniseries. I know in the book he leaves the Marston house and he goes to the boarding house. So I'm wondering if they're going to do that, if they're going to have the showdown in the boarding house. I would be curious to see how they did that, you know, because it was almost like he leaves Susan there for them and says, "Oh yeah, I've gone. I left you this. You know, Susan's here for you." And that, so they changed that whole up because of the, you know, the conclusion where, you know, it was 2 years later and Susan finds them. I'm curious, like, how they're going to do those elements. And again, I think the big thing for me is how are they going to play Barlow? Are they going to do him as the Nosferatu? I mean, if you see Alexander Ward, he looks like he could be related to Reggie Nalder. So a lot of people were saying it was William Sadler, and then they changed it. But I'm like, why would they? I don't see that happening. I don't see that they had William Sadler, and then they said, "Hey, we're going to get this, you know, kind of character act or makeup effects, you know, someone that's done like a lot of creature work." I see maybe that he was playing somebody else. I still stand with my theory that Sadler was either playing, I could see him as Crockett or Gillespie, or I could see him as an older Ben Mears. There's something about him that looks like, you know, I could see Lewis Pullman being William Sadler older. Maybe he's recanting the story. I mean, I don't know, because it is taking place in the 70s. That was just, you know, something that popped into my head.
Well,
what about you, Danny?
I have several, but you know, in the 79 and the 2004, Danny Glick comes to the window, and he, you know, he doesn't make it in 79. He does make it in the 2004, but he, you know, is immediately driven away, which I don't even like that scene in the 2004. The acting, I don't think really captured it. But you know, the book says that he comes and he steps in. Danny Glick stepped in, and I don't know. I just would be very curious to see how do they do the window scenes. I mean, really, because you know, Susan comes to the window. I want to see that. I mean, we've never seen.
She goes to Mark's window.
Yeah, we've never seen that. And also Marjorie Glick coming back. That would be really cool to see how they play that. So those are, of course, the whole thing I want to see, but we'll just have to see. So
I actually have a quick question for you too, because I've never really revealed this to this time, but I meant to do it in the last video. Since maybe 1981, 1982 for me, I would look at any clock anywhere, either at home, grocery store, bank, you name it. There's a clock somewhere. And it's never in the morning. It's always at night. It's just a little after 9:30. And you know what I'm talking about, where they go into the park and it's a little after 9:30. That's followed me all these years.
That's funny.
I'd love to hear what you two think of what that might entails, or just whatever comes to mind, because it doesn't creep me out. It doesn't give me second guesses. It's just always happened, and it still happens to this day.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're saying, because they focus in on it. Yeah.
I've never thought about that, but I tell you what haunts me every single day. I look at my clock and it's 4:44. I want to know what the deal is with that.
Which are
It's
my lucky
everywhere.
numbers. Those are my lucky numbers. So when I see them, I think of you, and then I'll text you, and then I'll send a picture of my microwave.
It's like I still
That's
can't shake it.
funny.
It happened today. Zoe asked me something. Yeah, it's 4:44. It's all the
Yeah.
time. So I don't know. Maybe I'm going to die at that time. Who knows? But no, I don't think about the fact. But see, now that you're mentioning this, so I'm going to start going, oh, it's a little after 9:30. I'm going to start remember that.
I'm just curious. Like I said, I don't think about it till I literally look up or either close at work because I'm always 2 to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so you just have that time. Yes.
It's not directly on 9:30. It's literally after 9:30 where it has it in the film where he's basically taping up those popsicle sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going, this is hysterical. What does that imply?
I think
Marjorie
you should change
Glick's coming
job.
into the store.
Marjorie
you know,
Glick's my boss.
Yeah, you
she's
should
coming
go
into
work
the
on it.
store.
That's right.
She's
Here
looking
she
for
comes
Danny.
to buy something.
And why did she forget about Ralphie? I've always felt bad for Ralphie because I remember when I went to the screening and Ron was there. He said, I think he said something like, I had the worst mom. She just completely forgot about me.
Yeah.
It was something like that because she did. She forgets about Ralphie. It's all about Danny. And I'm like, going, that's kind of messed up if you think about it. I'm wondering if there was like a scene or something or a cut scene or something. There had to have been. I've been really looking into like this book because there's a lot of stuff that
I used to have that. Now it goes for almost like 200.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen it high as 5 something for this one, but
Wow.
but this has like excerpts from the screenplay, and I was like reading it, going, "Wow, this would have been cool if I could." I would love to get the shooting script, the full shooting script, because this just has like some of the stuff they cut out of it, and there's like a little bit more like with like after Ben leaves the real estate office, Gillespie actually has an encounter with Crockett and says, oh, you know, asking him about who's that and all this stuff. And then there's like an encounter with Crockett and Ned Tibbetts. And like, it was almost like it had this very R-Town kind of feel. Like there was like a little bit more interaction with somebody. There's a scene where Ned Tibbetts goes into Susan's classroom. I'm like, oh, that would have been so cool to see.
Wow.
Like something like he said, oh, I'll talk to you after class. And that's why she was all hesitant when she was walking and Ben comes up to her. So like there was like a little lead into that. I'm like, oh God, I wonder if they shot that. That would be so great to see. Because I think Barney McFadden was good as Ned Tibbetts. I always liked him. And and I remember he was in an episode of 90210 one time. And I was watching it. And it's an episode where they go flying. They go into a like what do you call it? Kind of like a they just go like a day of like flying in these planes, and he's the guy flying the plane. And I'm like going, oh my God. I said, that's Barney McFadden. And it's like
there's Ned Tibbetts flying.
It was Ned Tibbetts, and he was such a neat guy. And it like, so he looked like he was a little heavier set, but it was him. And he passed away so long ago. It's like he was really young when he died.
Yeah, he didn't really do all that much, did he? I mean, you look online, there's really
character actor. Yeah, he was in small things, but he died at a really young age. I think he was in his, I'm gonna say maybe his 50s when he died.
I think so too, like
the
late 50s.
Yeah. And it's like, because most of these other, and I don't know, it just, and it also saddens me when I think about the film because so many people are gone. You know, so many of those guys are gone. I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Exorcist 3, but Ed Flanders, who played Bill Norton, is in that, and he is magnificent. Just such a good actor. I know he had a lot of problems with alcohol, but when you watch, I've been watching it lately because it's my favorite movie of that franchise. And as you guys know, they're doing new Exorcist films. Yeah. And I've just been into that third film, and so good. Him and George C. Scott have like some of the best dialogue. And it just, again, I love Ed Flanders. He was such a great actor, and I love him as Bill Norton. So it's just, again, just a little off on a tangent there, but just watched it yesterday. So I was like going, he's so good in that role. And just love him in The Exorcist 3 too. It's probably my second favorite film with him. So, but yeah, just I love that reading in this book and seeing some of these scenes, like, you know, even more about there's an extended scene with Susan and her mom talking about Ben Mears' writing, because remember she has the line about, oh, his latest book is about 2 men, and she goes, not one of those. It goes longer into that, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's like,
because it just kind of stops the scene.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
What did that imply? You
never.
Never.
It's like, Conway's Daughter. That was his other book. No, I haven't read them. That's what the constable said when he's like talking to the FBI.
I don't know many who have. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh
I
my
care.
gosh.
Richard K. Straker. No, I don't know what that stands for.
We can all quote this whole movie
I
right
know.
now.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
just start from the beginning. All right. So, hey, Ben, tell us about the screening. So, we got one this coming Wednesday.
So they're both on Wednesday. One's
okay.
at 4:30 and one's at 7:30.
All
I
right.
know the 7:30 is sold out. I just started checked. I always say the site wrong, and Ian Bolton told me how to say it, and I don't know if I can find it. Lilja's Library, I think, is where I saw it on. Somebody posted it on Salem's Lot Then and Now.
Uh-huh.
And then another friend of mine, my friend Tom, he reached out to me and said, "Oh, did you know there's screenings coming up?" So that's why I did another video. And I just said, "Hey, there's a screening coming up. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday the 7th, 4:30 and 7:30. And the links that were on that site give you links to get tickets. And I know the 7:30 is sold out because I checked it just before we got on here.
And where are they? Where are they screening?
I'm in Burbank, and I'm assuming, because somebody else reached out to me today. Let me see if I can pull one of my comments up, because I just have my page open over here. I think they said that they were saying it was Warner Brothers, but the site that I saw said something like Ions. It says it's in Burbank. That's what I know, that it is in Burbank. But let me see if I can pull it up real quick, like while we're talking here. Okay, here it is. There we go. Yeah, test screenings, and it says to get tickets here, and yeah, Iota Theater is what it says, and it's in Burbank. So that's all I know about it. So I don't know if this is on the Warner Brothers, like close to the Warner Brothers lot, because I know that there is a Warner Brothers lot in Burbank. So it's like I don't know if that's where they're. Again, I don't know, but I find it fascinating that they pull it and then a week later they announce that there's screenings. So my whole thing is like, I see they don't want to take a loss on this. Yeah. Because I feel like if they were gonna cancel it, they would have done it when they pulled it. Mm-hmm. Right. When they pulled it from the April 2023 calendar, I think they would have just outright completely canceled it, or they would have thrown it on a streaming site. So they're still trying to figure out a way to get this out somehow. Yeah. So I'm assuming this is going to have the reshot, the new scenes, because I know they did reshoots in June. So, but yeah, I just found that out last week. So it was on the 1st, so beginning of the month.
All right. Well, Sam, I wanted to end. You just had lunch with Ralphie Glick. Am I right?
I did, yes.
How was that? Were you scared?
No, actually, what was funny is that we didn't even touch on anything Salem's Lot that I recall. I think I was really aiming towards what it was like for him and his family to be in the industry and trying to balance that, because it was a different time. Yeah. Him and his lady are just very down to earth, very approachable. It didn't really hit me until you've seen those films where somebody kind of blacks out a conversation and then their own voice comes in with a heavy echo reverb chamber. Mm-hmm. And mine was, holy crap, I'm sitting across from Ralphie Glick from Salem's Lot. Exactly. And then his voice comes back to me. I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. I've been there twice. I know exactly where that's at.
Was he traveling through your area? Because I know you're in Portland, right?
No, he literally lives about an hour away from my dad's place. I went there for my dad's service.
Okay. Yeah, I remember. I'm sorry about
pretty
that.
Close. So I got in touch with Danny to get in touch with him, and
nice.
found out that he was willing to meet up. And I lived in Chico for about 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And so I just thought that's a perfect meeting place. We met at a restaurant that I worked at for about 2 years when I was in my mid to late 20s, and he knew exactly where that place was at.
Oh wow, neat.
That was the meeting place. And no, I really wasn't starstruck. I mean, at first I just went, oh my gosh, like you can't go too deep in your head with something like that. You just fumble and trip over yourself. I just literally went, what a small world. What a kick. He lives that close.
Yeah.
And just didn't really dawn on me. Just super down to earth. You can talk to him just about anything. Very approachable. It was probably one of the best celebrity meetings or past celebrity encounters I think I've ever had. And I've met a lot of people, and all of them have been great, but Ron definitely was very gracious and very down there.
That's so great to hear, man.
Absolutely.
Very good to
Yes.
hear. Well, I
Okay,
just
that's
wanna,
awesome. That's really cool.
yeah, I'm
I mean, I got back in the car and I just sat in the car. And went, well, cool. That's
Whoa.
off my bucket list. I'm good.
Yes, exactly.
Very, very
Man,
cool.
Man,
that's
well, I want to
great.
thank you guys for meeting up today and giving your insight. We'll hold to positive hopes that we're going to see this
Absolutely.
movie eventually.
No, we will. I truly believe we will. I'm just hoping that, maybe we'll hear something since these screenings are coming up in a couple days. Maybe we'll hear something next week, or I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll hear something, or maybe they'll put a trailer out or something. I feel like they got to throw us a bone a little bit at this
Yes.
point.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
Our
Oh,
pleasure.
it's my pleasure, man.
Well, guys, I want to sincerely thank Ben and Sam for once again joining me. Hopefully, we will see that movie come out. I hope it's in 2023. I just hope it comes out all together. We're going to hold on to hope. Yes, we're going to be positive. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. And hey, I wish for you and all your family and friends peace and blessings. I'll see you soon.